Hi, I'm Linda Mal, and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we visit the Modern and speak with artist Mario Garcia Torres about his exhibition, Focus, Mario Garcia Torres. Now for Art This Week. Hi, I'm Linda Mal, and I'm here at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth speaking with artist Mario Garcia Torres about his work in the latest installment of the Focus series. Mario, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you.
So you're typically referred to as a conceptual artist because you work in such a variety of different media, but you do tend to have a lot of consistency in the subject matter you address, specifically the investigation of lesser-known chapters of art history. What about this subject matter is so compelling to you?
Well, it's kind of a long story, really, that sort of drew me to that. It's not that it's. I think that when you start working and start doing research, you know, that same research sort of draws you and start to sort of shape what you do, and like it brings you to places, you know, and that's what happens. I think that when you're an art fanatic and you're just like trying to look for, just you're curious about specific chapters, or when you start reading things and then there's little details that sort of makes you more curious about, then you start sort of trying to find responses in some other places than books, and I think that's what sort of has got me started. And then little by little you realize that the more you dig in, new people come up, new stories come up that are not written, so it's just kind of evolves from one thing to the next.
So you just follow what you find compelling, and you follow what's interesting in the story?
I feel like most of the works that I have made, they come from very personal interest, but that doesn't mean that every interest that I have become a work. So like a lot of things, sometimes I'm reading things, sometimes I think, I should say that one of the most important things that's happened to me through exhibiting work is that what happens is that when you're exhibiting, really what you're actually saying is, I'm interested in this. Mm-hmm. And so it really has allowed me to meet a lot of people that I wouldn't meet otherwise, or it has become a kind of platform mm-hmm. for people to come and say, oh, I have this story I'd never tell because nobody's interested in my house, you know, yeah. and so the work really has become this kind of platform for meeting people, and so that those things, you know, it leads one to the next, and sometimes some findings, it gets to a point when you have to ask yourself if that could become a work, and then so that's what it is. At the end, the work it's a kind of explanation of my own research and a kind of sort of thoughts about how I relate to that story.
Well, I also wonder if it has anything to do with, you were born in 1975, so I wonder if it is maybe your way of removing yourself from inserting your own personal memories into the work.
Well, it's not my memories. What it is, what is clear in relation to what you're saying is the fact that I sort of started, let's say I started studying art history from the 90s, let's say, in a more serious way, and it was specifically in that period during the 90s is when those works from the 60s and 70s started to be reviewed. Like, you know, a lot of conceptual art projects and exhibitions and stuff, they weren't seen by that many people, you know. It was a very small crowd in a small gallery somewhere. It was a very small number of artists working at the time, and nobody really, there was very few people who experienced that firsthand. And in the 90s they started to make proper books and exhibitions, and I feel like my generation of artists, we were the first one who were exposed to that. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an explanation for that. I don't know if it's true, but that is an explanation.
That makes a lot of sense. So
that's what people have claimed before. I don't know.
In some ways I thought it was a way of detaching yourself, but in actuality it might be a way of these pieces are especially nostalgic for you because you were exposed to them when you were a young artist. So I think that's a good stepping stone to talk about the work in this exhibition, because in my research I was able to see how you might identify with Robert Smithson, who is, I don't want to say the subject of the work, but he's certainly the primary investigation was into Robert Smithson for the main piece of this exhibition, the Schlieren plot, the video. Will you tell me a little bit about the broad outline of this video?
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like even though like it's easier to nail down the fact that I do this research or whatever, I feel like it's not most of the time. It's not the actual subject of the research what becomes the subject of the work. Like they're just like sort of starting points to talk about different things. And so I think most of the time I will say that the work is really more about historiography and how things are constructed, how things in art are perceived, and how they become stories or become myths or whatever. And what really brought me to Smithson was first, of course, a very kind of honest interest about his work and his writings mostly. But little by little, when you're going through that, you sort of start. There's a specific character that comes up, and then there was a very specific beyond the sort of character that comes from writings, for example. Then there's a character that comes from pictures, and that's what brought me really to start thinking about this project some years ago, and it had to do with the fact that he was this character that came from New York out to the West, and every time he was doing that, he was kind of dress up as a cowboy with
hat, you bought the hat
and
the
boots
shirts.
and shirt, like how do you call it?
The pearl button.
Pearl button shirts, and I started to ask him, like, through that sort of mythology that had been constructed, how could I tell this story, and what would be the sort of, what does this story relate to, or why do I have a certain relationship to that imaginary story? And that's when I thought the first thing I did, which ended up in this show, is a country song. I wrote a country song because I thought it was interesting to tell his story in that form, because I thought he was an artist, but he was almost like a hero, like going out to the West and almost like a dying doing his work.
Yeah, and he has this tragic hero aspect of
exactly.
dying young while doing his work.
So I thought maybe we should try to tell it in that form. And so I wrote some lyrics, and eventually there was the opportunity to turn it into a proper song, and it was because somebody invited me in Dallas to a show, and they put me in contact with J.D. Wittenberg, which is a local, an artist that lives here in the Dallas area. And so with him, we reshaped the lyrics, and really he turned it into a country song. And that was the beginning of this whole thing. That piece was presented, and little by little we kind of, I suddenly started to think that piece was interesting to me, and how that worked out, and what were the implications of it. And so I wanted to make a larger context for the song, and that's when I started to think about the film, the Schlieren plot.
So in the film, you address two specific unfinished or not quite finished in his lifetime projects of Robert Smithson. And you also used an interesting element, which is a fictional character to add narrative, the gardener. Can you tell me a little bit about your choice in using the gardener to explore this topic?
Yeah, well, there's a number of works, let's say, quoted, some more directly quoted and some less so. And the film is that it's a road trip through Texas, basically going from Houston to Amarillo, and trying to visiting some of the locations, not only where Smithson planned to do works, but also places where he could have find the materials to do that. So it's kind of a way to claim that you can actually see the works, even though they were not physically realized. and the sort of the idea of having a fictional character had to do with figuring out how to leave the museum, or not just the idea of the character, but that specific character, which was is a museum gardener. I needed somebody who will pull out these stories or these thoughts, Smithson thoughts, from the museum and have them go out of the museum and be able to still be in art, still be acknowledged as that, but in the outside, which is what he was doing. So I thought a gardener was a very specific, very interesting character, because it's somebody a museum gardener, because it's somebody who is very much in touch with art, but at the same time he's always outside and has a very specific relationship to the weather, to the soil,
land.
to the land. And so in a way, I thought that story could be told through that. And that's how that character came about.
It's really interesting. So we also have in this exhibition, the centerpiece is the film, the Schlieren plot, but the other materials in the exhibition are really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about how you curated this focus exhibition in collaboration with the Modern?
Yeah, well, this is a film that I made last year, and when they invited me to show it here, it was very exciting, because I knew that they had some of the original drawings that Smithson had made for those specific projects that I'm talking about in the film. So immediately, with no hesitation, I thought, that it's great to have the film be shown with those drawings. And what that really brought is the idea to sort of start creating a narrative where works some works can be made and some works are not made. So the group of objects and gestures around the show are that, and some of them are finished projects like the film, but then there is the sketches for the film, and ideas that didn't have any, drawings and things that were notes for doing something that didn't come about. And so the idea is that all these objects and things kind of blur a little bit the idea that what are works made and what are works that are not made, or if that question really should exist, which is nothing extremely new. It's just a sort of a different way to sort of remember us, that and to really reinforce the fact that Smithson's work should be seen as if they were made.
We want to thank Mario for speaking with us. For more information on the exhibition, go to themodern.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your Polaroid.